Welcome to another episode of Moving Forward Talk with Diana. This platform is open to discuss various topics, sharing our own experiences. This evening we have with us Miss Christine. Miss Christine, it's a pleasure to have you. Miss Christine will be sharing her experience of dealing with a son with autism. As a disclaimer, we are not qualified to develop or offer treatment plans. We are simply sharing experiences. Welcome, Miss Christine. And Miss Christine, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm Christine. I live in Jacksonville, Florida, and I have 3 children. I have we have a mine, yours, and an ours. So I have a 24-year-old daughter, a 3-year-old grandbaby. I have a 16-year-old bonus son, and I have my youngest son, KJ, who's 6, and he is the one that has autism. I've worked in early childhood for most of my career, over 20 years. And I have a degree in nursing and a master's in organizational management. And I've been really blessed to work in a lot of different fields in early learning, from private to nonprofit, early Head Start, child welfare. I now work for a program that works with homeless women and families. And so I've had a real broad approach to early learning, which had helped me and kind of hurt me in a way, when we were walking through this journey, because I've walked a lot of other parents through this journey, but wow, when it comes to doing it yourself, all those things I would tell parents came back to me, and I was like, I didn't know how that felt. I thought I knew how that felt, but I didn't. I was giving them all the great advice, I'm encouraging, I'm there, I'm here with you, but I didn't know how that felt. So now when I am able to help families, it comes from a different place in my soul. Because I get it, I feel it, and I could say, I know how this feels. I know the grief. I know all these different feelings that you get. So it's been very interesting and very helpful. I feel like in a way, everything's been ordained in a way for me to go through this experience, to have this journey, to be able to help others.
Share your journey. When you first learned that your son was on the spectrum, what was it like for you?
Sure. So when I noticed something was wrong at 12 months, I knew that his vocabulary was great, but he wasn't really speaking. He wasn't having the same speech patterns that I had expected. And so, went to the doctor. He had a couple of scans. We had a CAT scan at 6 months because his head was so large. They did an ultrasound. They did a CAT scan at 12 months. Everything looks good. His speech is, it's wavering, but, give it some time, so we did. He was well-behaved. So of course, well-behaved children tend to have a later diagnosis because everybody's always looking at the behaviors. So he was easy to get along with, great kid. People like to have him there. So what we noticed at about 2, I registered him to have an early steps evaluation. And he was delayed in all areas, but not delayed enough in 2 areas that they would need to get services. But thankfully, I knew enough because of my work in the field to go back in 6 months and get reevaluated. Because those kids that are on the bubble, they eventually fall below the bubble. Because kids, their trajectory of learning is this way, where non-typical kids may have a lower trajectory, and eventually they get wide enough of a gap that they qualify for services. So we went back in 6 months, and surely there was enough of a gap between where he needs to be that he actually got evaluated for services, but he was almost 3 at that point. So we moved on and just did a transition into school. At that point, he was evaluated, but not diagnosed. He had definitely learning disabilities and speech disabilities, but his speech, where he was in speech, matched where he was socially. So he was 3, but his speech was at a 12-month-old, and his social skills were like a 12-month-old. He acted like a toddler. So the doctor's like, there's not enough difference. It was a little bit frustrating because the frustrating part is that when you have a diagnosis, you get services. You don't get a diagnosis, you don't get services. at that time, it was kind of okay. I was a little bit okay with it. But in come the next 12 months, we had no idea what was going to hit us when this 3-year-old who thinks like a toddler but has the gross motor skills of a 5-year-old was going to put us through. And so we went through 12 months of just chaos of our whole life being about catering to him, not doing this, not doing that, because we had these behaviors. We didn't know what to do. He was getting services, but there was a lot of other things we needed, which we came to find out was ABA therapy. So we went to the neurologist we went to a neurologist. We found out that part of KJ's problem too was he had some brain damage. And they believe that happened in utero. And that was another reason why the initial doctor did not diagnose him with autism, because here he had this brain damage. He was kind of following the same of his speech. So they weren't sure where this diagnosis was going to go. So we went back to the neurologist to do an update on the MRI to see if there was any changes. She just wanted to follow him. And when we got in the room, she was like, is he always this active? And I was like, yeah, and I'm following him, I'm trying to keep him, trying to get him to do, sit on the table. We're having this conversation, trying to keep him entertained over here. And she just was like, did you ever do an autism screener? And I was like, yeah, he definitely on the screener did that, but this is, I explained why. And she was in the same practice as that other pediatrician. She goes, sometimes we don't agree, sometimes we do. Do you mind if I screen him again now? And I said, absolutely. So she did some things. She goes, okay, yeah, he definitely, I am okay with giving him an autism diagnosis. He's at the level 3. And he definitely has some hyperkinesis, which is kind of like overactive. So at that point, she's like, how are you managing this? And I was like, I don't know. I mean, when you don't know what you don't know, you just do it, right? And it kind of hit me like, oh my gosh, we're exhausted. Like our whole life has been around this kid. Instead of us trying to take control of things, we've just let this overgrowth, because there is the grief of not having the typical child. There is the, oh, why did this happen? I felt the guilt of having a baby so late in life. I was 42 when I had, there's so many things that happen in your mind and your emotions, that you go through, that you stick yourself in this bubble. You're not doing things that you used to do because I can't, because I have this child here. You have these breakdowns in the grocery store where you have to leave your cart, you leave crying. There's all these things that happen, and you just kind of keep going. And at that point, I was like, oh, wow. Like, yes, I need help. And she goes, well, take this. You can get ABA therapy. This is what you need. Because with the neurological issue, he didn't qualify for ABA through my insurance. It was only if you had an autism diagnosis and only if you have this or that, So we started ABA, we started the Adderall, and my whole life changed, like literally in 3 months. It was like I became back in control. I had someone to tell me, so why is your kid running around naked? And it's like, at that point, it was the least of my concerns. I was like, I don't know. And so she'd say, so at 16, are you going to be okay with this? And I'm like, no. Okay, well, we're going to stop this now, and this is what we're going to do. I was like, okay. She goes, we're going to do one thing at a time, baby steps, one thing at a time. Let's work on one thing at a time, one thing at a time. And, year and a half later, it's like, what are we working on now? I don't know. We're working on toothbrushing, but it seems so minuscule when I look back at like how chaotic our life was and how, everything was catered around how to him not having a meltdown, instead of us taking that control and understanding and working on things and providing him the structure he needed. And also, having that support to say, okay, sometimes we don't do it right, but this is how we're going to do it next time. And having that support, she came to our house to help us. She was like, you've got to be exhausted. You've given him so many commands in the last 10 minutes. Like, she's counting these commands. And I'm like, or demands. And I was like, oh, is that bad? Because she's like, yeah, you shouldn't have to. You say it one time and then we follow, So it was so breathtaking. So after, and then I was able to really kind of process some of that grief and really process some of that disappointment, the guilt, because I was, my mind was free to feel other things and really come to the point where, okay, I want to help other people because I know how this feels now. Like, I get it. I truly get it, what I didn't get before. Like, I got the diagnosis.
Sorry, I just wanted to say, so unlike me, you were never in denial.
No, I always knew something was different. I had a little bit of the like I had no idea about the brain damage, like that whole piece
Right,
that was different. Um, it I was probably more in denial that it was something so severe.
right,
Um, just because he's always been very interactive with me and a cuddler. But the doctor will say, well, you're an early childhood person. You probably did a lot more nurturing and forcing some of those things to happen because that's what you do. So there was a lot of things that I did that maybe doesn't always naturally happen, or it's just the way he is. So with the spectrum, it's just such a variety. No two kids are alike.
right,
So I always knew it was something, and I'm very grateful because my husband, he pretty much got on board after all this. At first, he was like, "Oh, he's fine. He's just a little different." And I'll tell you a cute story. So when I really realized it was I signed him up for soccer shots. He was 2.5 or 3. The other kids were 2 to 3. And you get up at Saturday morning. We're gonna go play soccer. We're gonna, it's gonna be so cute and blah blah blah. Well, the first day I came home crying. My husband's like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "There's something wrong." He's like, "What do you mean?" I was like, and I say this because my husband doesn't understand sometimes all this stuff. And I was like, it's like Rain Man. He is like the Rain Man on that field. If you go out there, he's the one kid that is kicking down the cones and not kicking the balls. He's in the grass, playing in the grass, and has not followed any of the directions. And there were younger kids there. And I think seeing him in a group of his peers trying to interact, I was like, wow. So I made him go with me the next week because he was like, no, he's just KJ. It's just, he got out there and he saw it in the first 5 minutes. He's like, I see it now. I can see it. And so from that point on, like I said, we were, working to get all that. But, it took me to kind of point it out in a very succinct way for him to see it, because you do get, it's your kid. And
right.
like I said, we spent that whole year just getting through life. It could have been kind of like a denial because we weren't really we weren't making him do things that we know we probably should have, because we just, we just did whatever we could to survive that day.
And if I interject right here, you weren't doing things, you weren't having him doing things that he probably should have been doing. So I was the other way around. I have been in denial, and I'm probably still on that denial trail. And I've been in denial for roughly 17 years. Like my son is now 20. And all throughout the years, I knew within myself that something was wrong. And it is said we don't compare two kids. We don't compare the kids. But sometimes I would look at my daughter and I would look at him and I'm saying, something is off. And I would receive calls from school and I'm thinking, it's not my son. Because I remember one day the school called me and said, all of a sudden during lunch, your son jumped on the table, throwing his apple. No, ma'am. Did you see him? No, but the school, the lunch monitor reported it. And I said it like this: if you didn't see him, I don't want to hear it. It's not him, because that's not his behavior at home. But what I didn't realize then, or what I didn't want to admit, at home, it was a different environment. At home, he was being protected per se. And if we were going somewhere, I've always picked him up, so he never had to walk. I was his mouth, I was his ear, even at age 5, when I know he's not actually talking as a 5-year-old should. And he was in therapy from age 2 for speech therapy. But getting all the testing done, it was APD. And so I was satisfied with the auditory processing disorder. And then I think I didn't want the stigma of it either. So I became overprotective. So wherever you are, you're right under my arms. And you mentioned about the soccer. I had him in football because I'm thinking, you are a little boy like every other little boy. So you would play football. And even though he didn't want to, and even though I got upset at times because the coaches would yell at him, he didn't want to touch the grass. The team was over here, and it's his time to get in the game. And where is he? He's way over there by himself because he didn't like the crowd. So I did that denial, and now I'm dealing with that level of guilt, a guilt that I don't think I would ever get over. How did you, have you gotten over your guilt?
You know, I don't know that you ever really get over it, honestly, because I still have guilt because there are things that I know that he does that I may not tell the next provider because I just hope and pray he doesn't do it there, because you always have that fear. He's been kicked out of a preschool. So you have this fear, right? So then, you know, it's like guilt because I don't want to, I'm scared to say everything I know, because if I say it out loud, then it's true. And now I have to deal with that. And I don't want to, you know, and it's not like major things, but it's enough where it really messes with me at times. And I have to really kind of remember, like, he only does this, you know, and I think about it's a behavior. It's not, doesn't define him. Right. It is a behavior, and there's got to be a reason. We got to find the reason that these things happen or why he gets aggressive at times. He's not, I don't want to call him an aggressive kid because he's not, but there are times where, because he doesn't always have the words, that, you know, he does have that push and pull or hitting kind of mentality. But I think I don't know that we ever do, because we're parents, we're mothers, and, you know, we nurture our children, and we just wish we could do more. You know, what if I would have done this more? What if I would have done speech and ABA earlier? What if I would have pushed this further? What if I would have answered the questions different at early steps the first time? What if, you know, all these things. What if I didn't get pregnant? What if that wasn't the right, you know, to have this child? And, you know, what if it was a time that I got really upset, you know, that he had this oxygen incident? What did I do to make all this happen? And I think, you know, it's ongoing. I don't know. I think as parents that we ever feel like we did everything 100% right. You know, even my grown daughter, I think, oh God, I really kind of messed up here and there. You know, it's not, the guilt isn't the same because she's functioning and she's doing well. But I think every time we look at our children with special needs and we see some of their deficits or some of the things that they can't do as well, or they don't do like other kids, or any kind of disappointment, we own that, you know, because we don't want, it's not their fault. And it's really nobody's fault, but there's a humanistic approach, I think, that we have, that we own those feelings.
And I think one of my biggest problems too, I didn't want anyone else to know.
Yeah.
And I would have ladies came up to me in the past and would say, I think you need to get your son checked. I'm like, no, for what? He's doing fine. So I find myself, even though he's very active in church, so even in church as a teenager, and, you know, it is his, they call upon him, it's his turn to do something in front of everyone. And like you said, the words just not coming out. He have to stand there and search. And at that point, I'm so embarrassed. And I'm not embarrassed of him.
Right.
I'm embarrassed of the situation. And I'm looking around, hoping no one else is noticing that he's searching for his words.
Yeah.
And those are some of the little things that just take us all in a different mind frame. I believe it just take us in a different mind frame.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We had a situation. I was going to a restaurant to meet some friends after church, and I didn't realize it was in the same parking lot as Chuck E. Cheese. So as I pull in the parking lot, he sees Chuck E. Cheese. So I turn and I go to park, and we go in the restaurant, and he's walking. So I think, you know, we're okay. He gets in the restaurant and sees it's not Chuck E. Cheese, and straight to the ground. No turning back. And then I have to like try to get him back to the car because there's no way this is going to work. And that whole, you know, and he's heavy, he's 50 pounds, like, you know, so I'm having to carry him, he's screaming, he's wailing. And it's like, those are the moments we wish, like, you don't ever want to ever go outside, you know, your house again, because, and, you know, people don't know what to do. I had a friend there, and his son has autism, but he didn't know if he wanted me, I wanted him to pick him up. And so I looked at him and I said, you can pick him up, because I'm like, I need help. Like, just help me get him to the car. If I can get him in the car, like, I'll be good. I can do this. But, you know, those are those moments that, that actually, oh, I'm sorry, that actually make you not want to do those things.
Right.
You know, so it's just, you know, and they're not, and you prepare everything you can do. Like you said, everything you can do to prepare, you do. You have the snacks ready, you got the phone, whatever it is that can entice them to do what you need to do. And you just try to make it, you know, as quick and painless as possible. But those are the moments that are really, that just kind of defeat you in a way.
Yeah. I believe I got so protective where I wouldn't allow him to go anywhere without me. I just had to be there. If I wasn't going to be there, his older sister just had to be there. Just to ensure, because my problem was just to ensure no one is picking at him the way he talks. No one is laughing at him. Because if I'm there, then I can protect him.
Right, yeah.
So the very first time I sent him away from home without any of us being there, I think he was probably in 6th or 7th grade, somewhere there. And his school took that educational trip to Washington, D.C. And
wow.
Right. And he was going to be there for 10 days. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm not going to be there. His sister's not going to be there. I don't want him to miss out on this experience. So what I had to do, because I know I had to suit his clothes the way they should be worn, like put his pants with his shirt. I did everything. It got to the point where only 2 pairs of shoes, because if you have 2 pairs of black shoes,
right, you'll match everything.
You match everything. And I remember getting to church one Sunday, he was wearing 2 pairs of black shoes, but only 2 different pairs of shoes. No one else saw it, but I was and I took him outside, and I know I didn't deal with it the most appropriate way. But I was like, son, you're wearing 2 different pairs of shoes. And I don't know why I looked down, because I had no reason to look down, but I looked down and saw that, and I think I just went out of it. Not in front of anyone. I waited until
right
to ourselves. So it's just little things that I have to do. Even now, he's 20, and as soon as someone asks him a question, if I'm around, I'm answering. My daughter.
Well, I'm proud that you let him go to DC for 10 days. That's amazing.
Yeah, because his behavior is good. He preferred to be a loner. So as long as he's by himself, you would not know he's there. So I didn't have to worry about some of the other behaviors, because that's not one of his characteristics, which is, you know, it affects everybody differently.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I hope we can get to that point, you know, and that's, you know, why we're working so hard with the therapist and trying to do things. And, you know, you don't know. We don't have a magic crystal ball. We don't know how it's going to turn out. And I know I have a friend, her son went to Howard. They live in Atlanta. He's living at Howard University, running track, you know, on the spectrum. I mean, that's just amazing to me, you know. I can only hope for that. But I also know that I have to take my son where he is and let him blossom as far as he's going to blossom. And that may look different, you know. And I think, you know, going back to what you were talking about is it sound like a lot of anxiety. Like there's a lot of anxiety about having kids on the spectrum, because of always that fear of always, you know, not having someone make a joke of them, or not treat them the same, not get invited to parties, or, you know, all those things, or, you know, trying to explain why they're doing certain things and why they don't do other things, and a lot of anxiety.
And I think I deal with it more if I'm not seeing it. So even now that he lives on college campus, of course he's home now because his school year is over with. But he has been on college campus for 2 years, and he just graduated with his AA degree.
That's
and
great.
At one point, I didn't think it was going to happen, and I should never have lost faith. But I'm thinking, is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? And then I have to constantly remind him and push him, because he said to me one day, you just want me to be the person who I'm not. And that I really felt bad, because I know I pushed him just to be as what I thought he should be, but that's not who he is, and I have to accept that.
Yeah, and I think there's some benefit to
Mhm.
treat them as much as, you know, a typical child as you can,
Right.
because we don't want to coddle them so much that they don't get those experiences. Like, you know, before the pandemic, you know, I would, even though I love the pickup groceries because that's my favorite, especially with a child with special needs, but I do still try to take him every now and then to the store, because
Right.
it can't be, he can't be so isolated that he can't operate, you know. So there's the balance, right? I mean, I think there's some good things you can do by trying to keep them engaged in those activities to kind of push them a little bit. You know, we have to keep pushing them, because, you know, to sit back like we were doing that first year and just letting him run amok, like, and not doing things was not going to help him. You know, if we got to keep pushing and pushing and getting them to be independent. You know, right now we're working on showers. Like, I don't know if he'll ever get it, but he got potty training and he's brushing his own teeth, you know, like,
Right.
keep pushing the independence. And so I think, you know, that's a great thing that you did with that. And, you know, I think we all have our own personalities too. So we're all going to take things and do things differently. And that's your parenting style, and it worked for you. It's working for him. Obviously he's doing great, you know, but it may not work for somebody else, you know?
Right.
And so I think, you know, the hardest part is finding the support and some
Right.
people that you can really talk to and be honest. And that's why I love my ABA therapist. I can tell her, like, I am so frustrated. This just happened. And you know, I wanted to throw my flip flop at him because he keeps running away from me and I can't stand that. And he's like, she goes, well, don't throw your flip flop at him. I'm like,
Mhm.
but I can't chase him, you know? So we worked on what to do when he starts to run, you know, run away. He thinks it's a game or whatever. And it's like, drives me crazy. So I think, you know, finding that support, you know, and understanding, and know that we're not going to parent the same way and we're not going to do the same thing. And I think, just like I said, I need more encouragement to do kind of those things that I wouldn't do. It makes me extremely anxious to take him to the beach.
Right.
He loves the sand, but my thought is, like, what if he just runs out? I have this, and only with him. So I work with kids. I'm really good under, you know, stressful situations. I'm like, oh, go, go, go. You know, today there was an incident I had to kind of be out there to help with. But with him, I freeze. I completely freeze.
And that is
So
because that is because it now hits home.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's my heart. So I get scared to do those things. So I have to find a way, like, to bring his big brother with me, so I feel more secure. And it may be times that, like, I'm ready and he does fine. It's absolutely fine. And other times where I need help because I'm going to freeze and I don't know what to do. And I'm older and I'm not as fast. So, you know, I need somebody with some young legs or someone that can just help me to make sure, you know, that I got him, I got everything that we're supposed to have. We get to the car, we're good. So it's just that whole fear, you know, if it happens once, you just have that anxiety about it.
One of the things that I have always said to myself is, I'm like playing a tug of war sometimes, because on one hand, I'm guilty, you know, the techniques that I use to kind of condition him a certain way, I'm guilty of that. Where on the other hand, I'm like, I'm glad I did that, because if I didn't do that, he wouldn't be as independent as he is today.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it could be something simple as iron your clothes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you iron your clothes today. And I remember one day, he was probably 19, and he ironed and he was walking out to go to church. And I looked, something said, I'm always checking him.
Right.
I'm always checking. So I walked out and I looked and I said, oh, you didn't iron your shirt. I didn't say that's calm though.
Right.
And he was like, yes, I did. No, you did not. Yes, I did. I said, where? And he said, I ironed the sleeves.
Mm.
And I said, under the sleeves? And he said, yes. The other parts don't need to be ironed right now. And I said to myself,
Right.
so, okay, you're just going to be late, because if you go to church, and majority of the time I'm thinking about what folks are going to be saying about me as his parent, even though he's grown. I said, son, no, take it off. You have to iron the entire thing. I said, now if you were gonna wear a vest, you didn't have to iron, the balance of the shirt, but it's just your shirt, so iron it. And now, I think the way I have conditioned him, if there's such a thing, some of the behaviors really have been modified where I
Mm-hmm.
don't think I would have to worry about it anymore. Or it's
Right.
just maybe probably at the bare minimum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. I mean, you have to know, right, what your kid can do and what they can do, and like I say, you got to push them.
Right.
We want them to be independent. I mean, that's our goal. We're not going to be here forever, and that's a whole nother stress, probably a whole nother topic we could talk to is what happens after us. But like we want them. That's our whole goal is for them to be independent and feel like a protected part of society. I remember I met a guy at Publix. He brought our groceries out, and I could tell that he had some kind of disability, a special need. I wasn't sure what it was. And he walked out and he says he has autism, and I was like, yeah. He's like, oh, so don't I. I'm on the spectrum too. And I
Mhm.
was like, oh wow. He goes, so I usually can tell when I see kids that are like me. And I was like, well, look at you. You got a job? He goes, yes, ma'am. I work every day, but I feel like sometimes I get those little glimpses of hope of like,
Right.
see, it's possible. May not be, but it's possible.
It is
And sometimes that
possible.
hope is enough to just carry you through.
Yes, it is possible. And it's a very good thing when they don't allow the autism or whatever disability they have to define who they are.
Right.
They accept it and they move on with life the best way they possibly can. That is, something to applaud them for, because parents are over here just, I don't know this, I'm so guilty, or I'm so embarrassed of the stigma, and it don't bother them at all.
Mm-mm. No, they really, enjoy themselves, and that's one of the unique things about the autism is they really don't notice sometimes what's happening around them or notice the social cues, which it can be like a protective thing because they don't really notice when someone doesn't. Some of them will, but my son doesn't. He doesn't notice when kids don't want to play with him. He's fine. He's just by doing his thing. So yeah, I think you're right.
Mhm. And before we wrap up, is there any advice that you can share just for not giving out treatment plan, but just for parents who may be there and probably seeing some of these same symptoms, but are in denial?
I think the best thing I can say is, I know people are afraid of diagnosis,
Mhm.
but unfortunately, our insurance world and anything else, the diagnoses help you with benefits. And your diagnosis doesn't define your child. At this point, I think is a different time period that we're in
Mhm.
because there's a lot more awareness. And I think that you embrace it and don't run from it because with those supports and with those therapies and help and just you being open to it, you release yourself of some of that
Right.
stress and anxiety because you've been just holding it in, like you're just hoping and praying that something changes, but you're not really out there. And there's so many resources, so many things available. I mean, you don't have to go through this by yourself. There's so many of us out there that are willing to go through that. And, the earlier, the better.
Right.
And those diagnoses can change. It doesn't mean like, look at us, we didn't have an autism diagnosis at first.
No.
He also has brain damage. He has multiple things that are, that we found along the way. But if you don't research those things, and I mean, I'm so glad that our doctor said, look, we're going to do an MRI. We're going to do the ADR testing where they actually test to make sure the nerve
Mhm.
between the ears and the brain work, because he was like, I want to know why this is happening. There's a reason. And if there is no reason medically, then, it could be other things, but let's rule this all out. Make sure there's nothing going on with the brain. Make sure there's nothing going on with the hearing, and, and just get all those things done. Look at the whole thing early. So, you get a good picture of what's happening, and, and don't be afraid of the diagnosis because honestly, that's the only way you're going to get certain therapies and certain help. And
Right.
it isn't forever. It can change. They could say, we were not right. Maybe something happened or whatever. But, the diagnosis doesn't make your child, and it doesn't make your family, and it doesn't blemish your parenting or any of that. It's not a curse on your family. I know, it's nothing that we did.
Right.
This is who we're supposed to have and who we're supposed to raise. And, I could tell too that sometimes, when we would go to church, people say, oh, we're going to pray, he's going to be healed. And it's like, I would love for him to be typical. Don't get me wrong, but I'm not basing everything on a healing, because
Right.
sometimes we have to accept I was built for this. Whatever's happened in my life is something that I'm supposed to have.
And I was just going to say, God will not give us more than we can bear.
And I'm going to use this for good. So I'm going to share my story. I'm going to share my resources. I'm going to talk to people. I'm going to, connect and do those things. And now when I have those conversations with those parents of 3-year-olds that are scared, I can connect with you emotionally because I get it now. I get it.
Right.
And I can cry with them. I can empathize with them at a different level. And they need that, because you have to get through this emotional part. You
Correct.
said you were going to cry. Now I'm crying. Yeah, you have to get through this emotional part so that you can really, we have to be that advocate for them. And so you have to get to the point where you're, I'm okay. He's okay.
Right.
This is what my life is about. This is who I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be his mom. He's supposed to be my son. And, we're going to move together forward in whatever path that takes us.
That's true. And I would just add to that, which you touch a little bit on it. Don't be afraid of the diagnosis. Do not stay in the denial, because I have learned that by staying in denial, it didn't benefit my son at all. If anything, it caused more damage to him. And also, there's no cure, but early intervention works.
Yes.
Early intervention works. So thank you again, Ms. Christine, for sharing your story. I do appreciate it.